Hello YouTube, welcome back to one of my videos. Hope you enjoy and have a nice day. Number 1. Tom and I were both neurology students in our senior year. I think it all started when his mother died a few months ago. A drunk driver crashed into her car. I'm minoring in theology, but my friend was an atheist, which is why her death hit him so hard. He stopped going out with friends and stopped showing up at social occasions. He didn't show up to class. His girlfriend was empathetic, but broke up with him after 3 months of his abject listlessness. As a Christian, I never understood his absolute rejection of the divine. If you apply scientific logic to theology, you will arrive at the conclusion that, since there is no empirical evidence of God, God does not exist. I disagreed. Great scientists like Albert Einstein believed in God. The cold logic of science cannot and should not be applied to some things, and the realm of the divine is one of them. I understand now, more clearly than ever, why some things should not be scrutinized under a keen eye, lest we discover something best left ignored. I talked to Tom about God, the human soul and the afterlife. His mother was a good person. She gave food to the homeless and helped the less fortunate. I remember when I had this conversation with him, he laughed. There was a glint in his eyes that I had not seen before. Then he asked me, "What if I can prove definitively that everything you just told me is false?" In hindsight, I should have known Tom was not the joking type of person. Instead, I laughed with him and shrugged it off. To understand what happened next, some context is needed. There was a homeless man who appeared very oftenly in our campus, which is also very close to where Tom lived. Judging by his accent, he was probably Eastern European. He could not remember his name and was likely an amnesiac, so students in the campus called him John Doe. He was friendly and approachable, so people generally accepted his presence. A few days after our conversation, John Doe stopped appearing around the campus. Nothing was done about it. He had no family, so nobody cared enough to investigate. A week or so after John disappeared, I stopped by his apartment after class one evening to see how he was doing. After a few beers or so, Tom told me to follow him. We stopped in front of the bathroom door. "Remember what you told me about the human soul?" he asked. "I know you meant well. You were trying to make me feel better and all. But, bottom line, I think we would all be happier knowing the truth, rather than live on a bed of lies." He saw my discomfort and added, "I don't mean to hurt you or anything. I'm just trying to figure shit out. I need to know what you think about this." Suddenly, something heavy slammed against the wooden door. Tom pulled the door open. Inside the room was John Doe. He was in a sitting position on a plastic fold-up chair. He growled as we entered. His pupils darted to glare at us. I knew instinctively that something was very wrong with him. His hands were tied behind his back, and his legs fastened to the chair. There were burn marks on his forehead. Beside him were some used saline pads from the campus laboratory, attached to a car battery. "What is a soul?" Tom asked me. "From what I gather from reading the Bible, the Talmud and the Quran, the soul is, in a word, human consciousness." The texts don't agree completely on the details, but they agree that all humans have souls, and the human souls can exist without a body in the afterlife. John growled and snapped at us. The tendons in his neck and limbs were stretched tight as he struggled to free himself. He opened his mouth, emitting a guttural scream. "Look at him," Tom said. He held his hand in front of John Doe, who lunged forward to bite him and missed. "He is definitely conscious. But at the same time, you definitely cannot call him a human, because he no longer remembers anything, no longer speaks, no longer feels emotions like love, or sadness or empathy." "What the fuck did you do?" I remember asking. "I cooked his frontal lobe," was the reply. "My question is, Daniel, where is John's soul? If he had a soul, some kind of innate spiritual consciousness, and if it were in heaven or hell right now, how do you explain the creature we are looking at? Who is piloting that body? He is neither conscious or unconscious. The creature we are looking at is living proof that John Doe never had a soul." "What the fuck did you do?" I yelled. "Why the fuck did you do this?" "Because, Daniel," Tom said, turning his back on John to glare at me. "I fucking hate you, and all the people who pretend to give a shit, for telling me empty lies. I don't want false solace. I'm a scientist. I want the truth. This is the truth. I heard something snap. I realized John Doe had gotten free of his constraints. Days and nights of tireless and fervent pulling at the polyester ropes that held him, something no sane person could have done, had yielded him his freedom. Tom yelled, and in the chaos that ensued I remembered seeing blood spurting from Tom's throat. Everything felt distant, like something out of a drug-fueled nightmare, but my instinct pulled me from the floor, and I scrambled into the nearby bedroom, and locked the door. There were sounds of something hard cracking coming from outside the door, what I presume is the sound of bones breaking. The stench of iron filled my nostrils. Then John Doe started scratching at the door. His burnt synapses probably meant he could not figure out the mechanism of a door handle, but after several failed attempts he started repeatedly slamming his torso against the wood. Relentlessly, tirelessly, and exactly like how he snapped the polyester rope. I suspect the damage to his brain meant his sense of pain has been dulled as well. I have contemplated using the window as a means of escape if necessary. I might break my legs, but it is a better fate than what befell Tom. Alternatively, I have a pair of scissors from Tom's desk. If the worst case scenario happens, that John's body manages to break through the door before the police arrive, I will need to defend myself. He is still slamming fervently against the door as I type, but the hardwood can take a few blows. Number 2. Northridge Village stood as it always had, apart from most of the civilized world. It was a simple self-contained community consisting mostly of farmers and the simple village folk. On this late afternoon, bathed with the orange light of the setting sun, the village looked like a painting that Renaissance artists would dream of crafting. The sun glinted off the high cross of the Catholic church and shone across the crowded streets. In a field a farmer wipes the sweat off his brow, savoring a hard day's work before the true trails of the harvest would ravish him. Outside women are taking their washes off the lines, humming a happy tune. The local smith would bang his hammer one final time before closing up shop. The laughter of children could be heard through the streets as the young always manage to savor the joy well they could. For in this happy little village one simple truth lay supreme. The folk of the village were blissfully unaware of the hardships of the new world. They did not know nor care whom sat upon the British throne. However, there is one thing every member of Northridge Village knew, and that was you never went out at night. For this village sat at the base of the Carpathian Mountains, and the shadow of those peaks held more than just the cold in their dark depths. While most of the world was evolving and growing to believe that true evil lied within the murderer's or thief's heart, the people of Northridge knew much greater and more ancient evils. There were more graves in the town, born of this evil than disease or the passage of time, and many of those graves were empty. The evil that plagued this town did not leave bodies for the families to mourn, nor if they did, would they want to. Yes, this village knew evil, and evil knew them very intimately. A group of children ran past town square giggling and tossing a doll around. The owner of the doll, little Gracie, pleaded with the other children to give her doll back, but the other children were reluctant to give up their fun. They tossed the doll just over the small girls, reached delighting in her frustrated screams. "Come on guys, this isn't funny," Gracie yelled. "Really? Then maybe you should come over here, because from where I'm standing it's completely hilarious," her older brother Matt replied. One of the older girls rolled her eyes at Matt. "Come on, give her the doll. It's getting late, we need to get home." Matt heaved a sigh. "Fine, here you go, you little baby." Matt tossed the doll in the air towards his baby sister. However, a strange and powerful gust of wind pulled the doll like a kite, and it landed several feet away just on the outer edge of town past the graveyard. The wind stopped as quickly as it began, and with it the sound of all laughter stopped. The children all stood frozen as the sun sank beneath the church steeple, casting an early evening shadow over the field. They stood in silence, with the only sound being their ragged breaths panting out of their gaping mouths. "Go get it, Matt, please," Gracie pleaded. "No way. I'm not going out there when the sun is going down," Matt said with almost equal panic to Gracie. The older girl walked over to Matt and grabbed his arm roughly. "This is your fault. You took the joke too far, and you are going to fix it. Now get out there and make it quick. We shouldn't have been out here this late." Matt gulped audibly, but nodded his agreement. Matt began to slowly move through the graveyard like a man walking towards his death. He began to feel like Jack walking through the giant's lair. One wrong step could spell his doom. The sun started to cast long shadows from the tree branches. Don't step on the shadows, he thought to himself. If you do, they can use their powers to drag you to their lair. With his mind so encased in fear he couldn't even remember if that was true or something that the children made up. The whole world was silent and even the breath in his lungs didn't make noise, as if it too was afraid to wake the dead. His eyes scanned the many tombstones that surrounded him. So many died so young, all for breaking the village's one rule that he himself was close to breaking right now. He glanced at a tombstone and his blood ran cold as he could have sworn he saw his own name written upon it, and that the date was this one. He closed his eyes and silently mouthed, "It's not real. It's not real." He opened his eyes and saw the name wasn't his own and the date was from 2 years prior. He was closing in on the doll now. A few more feet and he could grab it. Then he would run as if the armies of hell were on his heels. For they very well could be, if he didn't hurry. He took one final step and began slowly reaching for the doll. Just grab it and run. Grab it and never tease Gracie again, he pleaded to his shaking body. His fingertips touched the doll's hand, and as soon as it did he felt the doll move in his grip. Terror ripped through Matt, and he turned and ran like the wind. "Don't let it get me," he prayed as he ran. Finally he made his back to his friends. "I felt it move. The damn thing is alive." The older girl gave him a smack on the head. "Of course it moved, you little chicken. Look out there." Matt turned and saw that the wind was once again blowing, only in the opposite way. "The wind has moved the doll," and here he was screaming of devils. "Please just run back and grab her," Gracie pleaded. Matt shook his head frantically. "Not a chance, sister. Not tonight. I promise I will go back and get your doll tomorrow. If it's gone, I'll buy you a new one. Hell, I'll make you a new one personally. Right now we need to get indoors, or those things will be the least of our worries." The older girl looked at Gracie. "Listen, I hate to agree with him, but he's right. We've been out too long." The children ran off with only Gracie left to look out at the darkening graveyard road. Her little doll Edie lay so close yet so far away. She stared at the doll as leaves swirled around its felt body. For the smallest of moments the little girl almost thought she saw the doll sit up and start to wave at her. That was all she needed to turn tail and run for her home. All across the town people were moved into a frenzy. The wind had turned stronger and far more ominous. Father Gregor locked up the church and stared into the forest at the base of the mountain. They were coming tonight. Of that much he was certain. The villagers had been careful as of late. The beasts would be growing hungry, and the hungrier they got, the darker and more clever they became. Though he never could go through with such a thing himself, he began to understand how his ancestors might have offered a sacrifice to please such a beast. The idea was abhorrent to say the least. However, the thought of a peaceful night's sleep was damn tempting. Damn tempting. The streets emptied as closed signs were flipped, doors were locked, and crucifixes were placed in almost every window. The town was cleared and only fallen leaves moved in the streets. The last rays of the sun sunk beneath the horizon and a blanket of blackness spread over the sky. The village of Northridge, a town that is normally full of love and laughter, was put to rest. For in the hours of darkness the town no longer belonged to its people, it belonged to them. "But mommy, I can't sleep without Edie," Gracie pleaded with her mother as she was being put to bed. Her mother sat on the bed and stroked her daughter's hair. "I know, I'm sorry baby, but you are getting to be a big girl now, and I know you are stronger than that. You just need to turn over and close your eyes. Before you know it, the morning sun will be streaming through that window and everything will be alright again," her mother soothed. "But what about Edie? She is all alone out there, alone with them," Gracie said, and a shiver went through her body at the mere mention of them. Her mother laughed and continued to stroke her hair. "Don't you worry about Edie, they would have no interest in her. In morning light we will go and grab her, and she will still have that big smile on her face. Then you can smack your brother upside the head with her." Gracie laughed at that, and her mother got up to exit. "Mommy, why do we stay here? There are other places in the world, places without evil," Gracie asked. Her mother lowered her eyes and shook her head. "I know this is hard to understand, but evil is out there, no matter where you go. It can come in any form, even those you trust. If you let evil push you around, then you let it win, and its wickedness will spread. We have to stand firm against it to show it that light is stronger than the darkness." Besides, as long as we are careful, they have no power over us. We hold the power and even they know that." Gracie paused for a moment then nodded. She wished her mother good night as she left the room. Gracie's mother was left to ponder her own words that even she didn't fully believe. The night was full now, and in this village no one lit their lamps, no candle flickered in the dark. The only light was that of the waning sliver moon that shone through Gracie's window, bathing her in its cold and distant glow. Gracie lay awake thinking about the world of the night. From time to time travelers would pass through the town and pick up supplies for their journey. They would tell tales of a world where men, women, and children could walk through the peaceful night. She marveled at the wonders of bonfires, lantern dances and even midnight strolls. To her the idea was as far-fetched as traveling through the stars, but they spoke with such conviction she couldn't help but dream. She let out a sigh, for even at 5 years old she knew that a world without fear of the night is a world she would never see. She had turned over and could feel herself slipping into the world of dreams when the sound of scratching came from her window. The sound froze her blood and caused her to shake uncontrollably. "You can't get in, because I say so. If you ask, I'll say no. So since you are not welcome here, then please go go go." Gracie sang into the night. It was a song taught by her mother to help her get through the scary moments. However, the chant did little good for her now, because the scratching continued and got louder. "I said you can't come, and so please go," Gracie yelled through chattering teeth. "Oh please Gracie, I'm so cold out here." A small but sweet voice from outside rang. Gracie's eyes widened, for she knew that voice. It was partially her own, but she knew the true owner was Edie. It was the voice Edie would use when they talked to each other at night. Gracie turned in her bed and faced the window. There, standing on the narrow ledge, was Edie, scratching at the glass. "Edie, you came back," Gracie said in an excited tone. "Yes, but why did you leave me out there? I was all alone and so scared. Why would you leave me like that?" Edie whined and sounded like she had tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, it was mean old Matt that did it," Gracie replied with scorn in her voice. Edie issued a laugh that actually unnerved Gracie slightly. "Oh, I know, and trust me, you and I are going to get him back. I have many ideas on that." Gracie became afraid again. She had no doubt that was Edie out there, but something had changed. Her perpetual smile that used to bring her joy now caused Gracie to break out in goosebumps. The doll's eyes, normally completely vacant, now had an intelligence and just a hint of malice twinkling in them. "Oh Gracie, I'm so cold out here, won't you please let me in?" Edie pleaded. Gracie froze again, for those were the one words you could never obey at night, no matter what. "You know I can't, Edie. You know the rules as much as I do." The doll seems to twitch for a moment that someone older and wiser would have known to be associated with rage. The doll righted itself, and if possible its grin grew wider. "That's okay, you don't have to let me in, just open the window and pull me inside. Then we can be together, and you never have to sleep alone again." Gracie gulped but looked hopeful. One quick grab and she could have her doll back, and they could go off to dreamland together. Edie would stop the bad dreams. She always did. Gracie got out of bed and began to tiptoe to the window. "That's it, Gracie, prove to me, old Matt, that you are braver than he is. Oh, how embarrassed he will be in the morning. You could hold that over his head forever, just like he held me over yours." Gracie smiled. She could just see Matt's face filled with shock and shame. She couldn't wait to tell all his friends, especially the girl down the street, who even Gracie knew he fancied. "Come on, open the window and you and I can play together all night." Gracie undid the window latch and could feel the cool breeze hitting her face. She had never felt a night breeze, and it felt wonderful in the stuffy room. "Take my hand, Gracie, and we will be together forever." The doll's final word seemed to echo in Gracie's mind, and with no fear or hesitation she reached out and grabbed Edie's felt body. As she closed her hands around the doll, another hand closed around hers. The hand was completely grey and had long claws on the end. With surprising strength the hand pulled Gracie right out of the window. Gracie looked down and issued the loudest scream her lungs could produce. The creature belonging to the hand was the most horrible thing she had ever witnessed. She had heard stories from the other children about what they looked like. They would say horrible things to try and scare her, and yet none of that came close to the fiend that lay before her. The creature was a woman, or at least it used to be. Long flowing black hair seemed to almost hover behind it like a living cape. Her skin, or what remained of it, was the darkest and yet dullest grey she had ever seen. Her skin was peeling away in several places, revealing not only her bones, but also all manner or terrifying creatures crawling under the surface. Maggots, spiders, even centipedes seemed to make home in her body. The woman's fingers were long but crooked, as if they had been smashed with a hammer over and over again. Her mouth gaped open until large incisor fangs poked from her blackened gums. However, it was the eyes that frightened her the most. They were not the blazing red as she had been told, but jet black orbs that pierced into her soul. Gracie saw every nightmare she ever had swimming in those depths. Forever. The nightmare lady echoed once more. She stuffed Gracie under her arms and leapt into the night. Matt awoke at Gracie's scream. In an instant he knew that was not the scream of some dreamed nightmare, but a very real one. He got out of bed and ran as soon as his feet touched the ground. He sprinted through the house, knocking things over but not caring one bit. He had to get to his sister. Nothing else mattered. He burst through her door and his eyes went straight to the open window. No, he thought to himself. Gracie was young but no fool. She would never open the window for them. Why, Gracie, why? His thoughts were broken by a horrifying cackle outside. His eyes narrowed in, and he could see his sister being carried away by some creature. All at once nothing else mattered. Not the village rules, not his own safety, only his sister mattered now. Matt ran and leaped out of the window, and landed on the ground below. The fall from the second story shattered his left leg and he knew it was broken, but it didn't matter. He hobbled through the streets chasing after the sound of Grace's screams. "Help her," he shouted at the top of his lungs. "Please, for the love of God, somebody help her." But he knew it would be useless. The people of this village would not leave their homes at night, not for the world itself. He was alone in the fight for Grace's life. So be it. Matt ran as fast as he could on his broken leg. Even if they cut off both his legs he would crawl to her. He made it out of town to the edge of the woods, and to his surprise he saw Gracie standing there. She stood by the edge of the trees shaking from head to toe. "Gracie, thank God, come to me, let's run home." Gracie did not move, but stood there shaking and panting. "Come on, sister, nothing is going to hurt you, now that I'm here. Please come to me, please." Matt begged. That was when he saw it. Barely made out by the light of the moon was a dark grey hand on her shoulder. Then out of the darkness he could see multiple pairs of jet black eyes. They were eyes that shouldn't stand out in the dark, but nothing in nature was as black as these eyes staring at him. Matt let out a deep breath. "Please let her go. I offer my life for hers. I'm much bigger and more full of blood than she is." Matt begged. At the word blood he could hear a loud puffing sound. The sound of a predator scenting prey. In that moment he could almost make out an outline of a grey face in the dark. Matt got to his knees and lowered his head. "I offer my life and service to you. Feed on me, turn me, torment me for eternity, just let her go, please." With his head down he couldn't see, but the sound of the creature's panting grew louder and louder. Then there was an unnatural silence, as if the universe itself held its breath. Then out of that silence came a cold and inhuman male voice. "No." The voice rang, and Gracie was pulled into the forest. Grace's screams rang through the night. Matt screamed back and got on his feet to run after her. A pair of strong arms wrapped around Matt's chest and held him back. "No, boy, you mustn't go out there." Matt knew that voice very well. It was the voice of Father Gregor. "I know how you feel, child, believe me, but there is nothing more you can do." Matt continued to struggle and grunt, but it was no use. Finally the sound of his sister's screams faded into the night. That was the night that would shape Matt's life forever. That was the night his sister was taken by the vampires. Number 3. Billy slowly facilitated his way in, careful to avoid cutting himself on the broken window. He had gained entry to places similarly, and tried his best to clear the shards from the frame using his thick jacket. It was difficult to wipe it all away clean. That was the thing about glass. It seemed to hide well in plain sight. Story of Billy's life. His jacket ensured at least one layer of protection. When he slithered his way into the old classroom, he collected a tattered rucksack from Jess's gloved hands before helping her in. "Are you sure this place doesn't have one of those silent alarms?" she whispered. "No, but then if it does, we won't hear it anyway," Billy replied nonchalantly. He knew vagrancy was bottom of the priority list for any law enforcement team. He also knew the school had been abandoned for at least 5 years since closing. Nobody outside of it would care about a small break-in. Knowing the history of the place, most would sooner wish it were burned to the ground. Sunshine Park Primary School. It sounded so bright and cheerful, but the title was no more than a masquerade. One big broken dream full of damaged memories and rotten evil. Not closed due to budget cuts or the heavy remediation that was so obviously needed, but rather due to its cemented reputation as one of the most horrifying examples of child abuse in any school system. Abuse that Billy knew all about. Jesse followed him across the large room, concerned at the way he casually squeaked his grimy sneakers on the floor tiles. It was deliberate, a sound to create memories from within. He remembered back to that same sound as a child, planting his soles to the floor. Squeaking. Running from something he could not remember. The room was cold enough to see the moisture from each breath. There were a few chairs overturned and drained pen markers on the floor. It was a shell of what it once was. The sounds of birch desks scrubbing against the floor and pencils scribbling on exercise books. Heavy breathing from Brother Smith sat staring at each child one after the other. Billy remembered the smell of pipe tobacco on his clothes, mixed with a sour body odor. I remember this room, Billy said vaguely. It was after midnight, and the only source of light working in this gargantuan building was being poured in from the street lamps outside. The windows were so large the illumination was more than enough to showcase the massive complex to a certain degree. Where are we going exactly? Jessie was a little unnerved at her boyfriend's calm demeanor. This was followed by an expression that unveiled a sense of vacancy. He was trying to remember things deep rooted into his subconscious. There's a place in here where we can crash for the night. I used to go there all the time, he replied entranced. They walked slowly out of the old classroom into a gigantic corridor, their shoes crushing loose drywall chunks with each step. The corridor was lined with open classroom doors on each side with big swinging double doors at each end. The glow from outside shot lines throughout this space. The ceiling was punched with old tiles cracked off, and numerous cables hanging down like nooses in the dark. Brown stains of old water created a musty smell to offset the dust from the paint. Flakes that floated around like lost spirits. A couple of old sliding whiteboards could be seen at the end of one hallway, alongside a wicker wheelchair that ominously faced towards the couple. Billy led on while Jessie fought the urge to choke on the dense particles that filled her throat. There's a little hiding place under the stairs over here, Billy pointed out. Just there, next to the main flight of stairs, a small door that looked like a broom closet rested shut. An off-base painted door with 3 slits in the top, maybe for air venting from the chemicals. It looked like nothing to Jessie, but to Billy it was like something from a postmodern fairy tale. She could imagine a child playing hide and seek there during recess, but for an overpass camp there was no way an adult could work with this. Check this out. Billy pulled the handle open slowly. Jessie could not see anything for darkness. It was like a cave leading into the very fabric of Billy's mind. He reached into his thick plaid pocket and pulled out a small flashlight, clicked its soft trigger, and shone the light into the small doorway. Jessie reacted, surprised. Wow. The small hatch opened inside to a larger area, enough to hunch down without kneeling, and enough headspace to not worry about hitting something. The space wrapped around underneath the entire stairwell and revealed a storage area at the back. Best of all, despite the ruins being mostly empty, this area was still stocked. Aside from a couple of bleach bottles rolling around, the shelves contained blankets, towels, napkins, some religious reading material, and containers of bottled water, all unscathed by time and neglect. They must have forgotten to clear it out after the place closed down. Billy smiled. Okay, this is actually pretty cool, Jessie admitted. Billy crouched and went in first, grabbing items as he got further in. It was a C-shape, and around the back of the stairwell a small space that Billy was already familiar with. I used to hide here all the time. I felt safe here. Jessie's baggy eyes carefully observed Billy creating a makeshift sleeping area using the blankets and towels. She had questions of her own. She whispered, "Hun, what do you mean by feeling safe? Who are you hiding from?" Billy sat down and took his shoes off, relieved to rest his aching feet. His stolen and stained sneakers 2 sizes too small. He rifled through the various drug paraphernalia in his pocket to find a singular flimsy joint which he lit right away for a deep long draw. I used to come to this school when I was a kid. You heard about what they did to the kids in this school? Jesse nodded. Everybody plus their closest friends and family knew about the abuse suffered at the hands of the brothers and sisters. I remember this one man, Brother Loke. He used to terrify me. He used to terrify everyone. He was this big, tall, bald man who used to go around the corridors right here on patrol every time a lesson was in play. He wore this wrinkled black shirt and a dog collar and just looked like a typical priest, except he had this huge brown leather belt he'd removed from his jeans. He paused for a moment. Another repressed memory had stalled him mid-sentence. He took another drawer and found his bearings. He'd remove this belt from his jeans and grab it with both hands and just snap it. Jesse listened intently and held Billy's free hand. Snap it? Billy handed the joint over and mimicked the motion. He would snap it between his hands. You could hear the crack of the leather snap down those hallways every lesson time. Snap, snap, snap. The closer he got to your classroom, the louder it got. Jesse shuddered and quickly glanced around the space, taking in every dark crevice. Billy turned off the flashlight. Some of the outside light had reflected into the space from the door being open. It was enough to see about 6 feet in front of them. Billy continued. Snap, snap, snap. Just the sound alone would scare you to death, just knowing he was there. Sounds creepy as hell. Like I said, he used to terrify everyone. I used to see kids going into his office, and he put the fear of God of them. They would leave crying, confused, and I could not understand why, until it was my turn. One day I was in class, one of the sisters was teaching us about long division or some shit, and I looked to the door, and here was Brother Logue staring right at me. Jesse could see Billy's eyes begin to well up. She knew this must have been his first time out loud telling his account. No interruptions. She passed him back the joint, and watched him take another hit. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked so angry with me, almost as if he wanted to kill me. At least, that's what I thought at the time. I didn't realize it was actually much worse than that. I turned my head to the front for a few minutes just using my peripherals, until I saw his shape leave from behind the glass. I was petrified. Next thing, I get called to his office. Jesse caught wind of a crashing sound, and jumped at the noise. A piece of the ceiling tile must have struck the floor near them. Billy spotted her unease. That's normal. This old place is falling apart. There's nobody here. Jesse's arms were folded. You know that for sure. We had to break the window to get in. Nobody has been here for years. This place is rotting. Jesse looked down at her hands now shaking as Billy took a big inhalation. The interruption had cleared his mind enough to continue with the story. Anyway, I got called to Brother Logue's office. I walk in, and his bookshelves are lined off with thick leather-bound religious texts. He's facing the wall. He has this little golden tray on his desk to keep his tobacco pipe in. The pipe is laid on the tray, so I figured he must be holding on to something already, something I couldn't see. Billy's lips tremble. I couldn't speak. He turned around, and he's got that belt between his two hands. Snap. Jesse flinched. I ran as fast as I could. I saw the little door open in the corridor, and I hid here, inside, right here. I could hear him pacing up and down the corridor, looking for me, but he never found me. Billy placed the now burned out joint on the floor. The smoke had filled the air. Every time I came to class, every time I came to school from then on, I hid right here. Sometimes I'd hide away here for days. And every time, I'd hear that snap echoing down the corridor. Jesse saw the terror in his eyes, and knew there was more to his experience than that. Either he did not wish to tell her the full story, or maybe his memory buried it so deep it would take a pickaxe to get at it. Her own body ached, but she wanted to listen. Billy's eyes, despite the tears, looked heavy. She implored him to get some sleep. Once his head felt the floor, he settled away to a near coma. Careful to allow him to rest, she soon found the plastic case she needed from within the confines of the rucksack, complete with the needle her dotted arm so craved. Snap. Jessie woke up with sweat running down her back, her neck stiff from the rolled towel her head was sleeping on. It was like a nightmare. She was sure she heard it. Snap. It was faint, but real. She did hear it. The echo rang through the hallway just next to them. Jessie's heart was racing. Hun. She whispered to Billy. Nothing. Billy was dead to the world. She prodded him through the blanket to try and wake him up. Babe, there's somebody else in the building. Snap. Jess's breathing had heightened so much she sensed an impending panic attack. She begged her body to remain calm, but the sounds drew closer each time in this old, condemned place. Snap. Jess's whispers grew louder as her state of alarm intensified. Babe, please wake up. Please. She slapped at his face in desperation, and that's when she noticed it. There was no breathing coming from Billy. Babe. Jessie clutched the blanket and ripped it away from his body. She screamed. Billy's limbs were contorted in varying directions, his face drooped, and resembling an Edvard Munch painting, sheer fear and terror etched on every bone in his body, snapped like a chicken wing. Jess's throat was hoarse. She swung her head round to exit, and that's when she saw it. A figure hunched over no more than 4 feet away from her. A tall lumbering thing, fleshy naked, skeletal in the face with 2 eyeless holes that somehow locked onto hers. Within its spindly fingers, in both its knobbled hands, a brown leather belt held tightly with purpose. Snap. This is all for today. Thank you for watching my video. Bye.